and we were talking about the IKEA effect, if you guys remember that. So basically, if you give people something like IKEA furniture comes in a bunch of parts and some instructions that usually aren't in English. And the idea is that it's really nice furniture, but you have to put it together. When you put it together, you value it more, right? You place more value on that product because you put it together. You understand the time and effort and energy that went in it. So you're going to place a higher value on that particular product versus one that you can buy of the same quality put together already. And so part of this process is justifying why you would spend as much as 60% more on a particular product, because you know it was handmade, because you know it was actually put together by human effort. And so part of what we're going to discuss today is all about decisions, purchasing decisions specifically, why it is that we feel a certain way when we make certain decisions about certain things, whether it's to buy them, whether it's to, decisions on our life, for example, getting married, choosing what school to go to. We're going to talk about all of these decisions in this next sort of set of material. So we kind of started out a little bit with purchasing decisions, and we're going to come back to purchasing decisions. And talk a little bit more about that cognitive dissonance effect. So cognitive dissonance, remember, is when you have dissonant feelings, thoughts, behaviors. So for example, we had talked in the past about like you want to be a healthy person, but yet you smoke. Those are very dissonant or different thoughts. On the one side is healthy, but yet your behaviors don't match up. And so because of the inconsistency, we end up feeling really uncomfortable. And so what we do is we try to justify our decisions, we try to justify our actions. And so through that process, we either create more dissonant or consistent thoughts, or we have more consistent behaviors, and in that case, engage in behavioral change, which is the hardest thing to do, but we do engage in that sometimes. So we're going to talk about more a little bit here about purchasing decisions. And we're also going to talk about just decisions in general that you have to make in your life. So here, when we think about the kinds of decisions that we have to make, every single time we make a decision, we're going to experience some dissonance because the decision is against multiple options, right? So whether you're trying to choose between buying this car or that car, or choosing to go to this school or that school, or choosing a salad versus a sub, whatever decisions you're trying to make, there are multiple choices. And because there are multiple choices, you are going to then experience dissonance because you can't have all of the choices. And if you take all of the choices, then you're not going to experience dissonance. And that's not necessarily a decision, unless the decision is all or nothing. And again, you're still making a decision and you're going to have some dissonance there. So whenever decision that you're trying to make, the choices that you have, there's not going to be one that's 100% all positive. There's not going to be one that's 100% all negative. There's going to have pros and cons to each one. So your chosen alternative, the one that you pick, the alternative is going to have that chosen alternative, the one that you pick, is going to have some negative aspects to it. The one that you reject, the one that you decide not to pick, is going to have some positive aspects to it. And so what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to justify your decision to yourself, and you're going to have to figure out how to make yourself feel better about not choosing the thing that you didn't choose, right? Even though there's some positive aspects to it. So for example, let's say that you purchase a truck. Okay. So let's think about a sort of a decision-making process. So we have, okay, we want to buy a truck in this day and age. How much is gas? Is gas pretty high? Or is it like, oh, super cheap? No, gas is insanely high right now. And so let's say you've decided to purchase a truck and you said, okay, well, I want to buy this truck. I really like it. But the bad thing about the truck, because your chosen alternative does have some negatives, is that it is a gas guzzler. Okay. It is just bad. All right. But maybe some of the positives are that it's safe. Okay. What do you think that you're going to say to yourself to justify buying the truck that is the gas guzzler? It's like, what are some things that you can convince yourself of? I made a good decision. So what can you tell yourself? So you have other alternatives, right? You could pick any vehicle that you want. Okay, you like the appearance. Gas prices are going to eventually go down, right? Okay, so they might be high now. It's safer. So even though I'm paying more in gas, I'm not paying in my life because it's safer, right? It does well in bad weather. We're going to be expecting bad weather, and I know it's going to travel well. It keeps my family safe. It keeps me safe. These are all perfect justifications for telling us why we're going with our chosen alternative versus the other vehicle. Okay. It's safer. Gas prices are eventually going to go down at some point. Whether I'm spending a little bit more money now in the future, that's not always going to be the case. It's, I like the way that it looks. It makes me happy. I like driving it. Lots of different things. I can haul things in it, right? So maybe you don't have another vehicle that can haul trash or furniture or whatever, and say, maybe I'm moving soon and this is going to be really helpful. So there's definitely ways that we can justify a decision, a particular choice that we make because because we want to make ourselves feel better. And that's essentially what we do in every decision that we make. However, not all decisions are created equally, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. So when we are engaging in this post-decision dissonance, okay, this uncomfortable feeling is going to be aroused when we have made a decision. Immediately we pull the trigger on that decision, then we're going to have dissonance. So what we do is we enhance the attractiveness of our decision, of our choice, right? Okay, so let's say it's the truck. Well, I like the way that it looks. It's really safe, okay? And then we devalue the rejected alternatives. Oh, that car is like really ugly. It's also really low to the ground, and I just think that my back's gonna hurt getting into it. It's not super safe. It's made of tin. Like, we always make these kind of like little things that we say to try to basically trash the one that you didn't pick, and then find even more good things about the one that you did pick. And that is because you don't want to experience regret, right? You don't want that uncomfortable feeling anymore. And so you do that by looking at the one that I chose is more attractive than the one that you didn't choose. Yes, we do this with humans as well. And so, for example, let's say you've got two people who like, and you want to, you need to make a decision. Who am I going to kind of go with? Absolutely. The person that you choose to be with, you're going to look at a lot more pros to them once you've made that decision. So let's say, okay, I've decided to date this person and I'm going to, reject this person. The person that you've decided to be with, you're going to look at all their positives. Well, they're financially stable. They're good looking. They're smart. Okay. This other person, I don't know how they're going to act with a family. They seem to have commitment issues. You're going to downplay their qualities, and you're going to upplay the one that you choose. And yes, we do that with people. We do that with things. Any kind of decision that we make, we're going to do that with. And so part of the process of reducing that post-decision dissonance is we distort our likes and dislikes, right? So we'll downplay the negative aspects. So let's say, we pick somebody and we're going to have, we're going to spend the rest of our lives with them. And we say, okay, well, yeah, they have some quirks, but it's cute, right? And we try to downplay anything that might be negative. So if it's like, for example, let's say you hate the way they eat, right? And they chew really loud, and you're like, oh, but it's endearing, as you put the headphones on your ears while they're eating, right? And then the other person, you're like, well, they also had, really loud chewing, and, even though they might not have, you're going to totally, kind of warp how you view them. So attractiveness absolutely can be anything. So physical attraction, right? So you can be attracted to like physical feature, aesthetic feature, but you can also be attracted to qualities as well. Think of it like, so every single time, my husband does not understand this, but I swear the reason why I have such a hard time deciding where to eat is because of post-decision dissonance. And I'm always like, well, I could have had something better. Right. And so if you think about even like choosing your meal, you're going to be like, oh, this is really, this tastes really good. And I'm really glad I made this decision because today the chicken was really tender, and, I'm glad I didn't go with the steak because that could have been dry. So it could literally be physical, right? It can be specific qualities. So you can say qualities in a person. You see the person, well, I'm so glad I went with him because he's so kind and generous. And that person was kind of selfish. So absolutely, it can be qualities, physical aspects, anything. But we can actually see this, right? So we don't want any regrets in our decision, but we can actually see this in the research. So there was a study done as far back as 1956, so what they did is, this is going to sound super stereotypical, but it was 1956, it was the 1950s. And if we were to redo this study today and use men and women, it would still be the same effect. But so what they did is they had a researcher who posed as like a representative of a particular consumer testing service, right? And they asked women to rate attractiveness of particular desirability of appliances, right? So attractiveness in the sense of like, would you put this in your kitchen? Would you use this when you cook? Things like that. And so the appliances were things like toasters, electric coffee makers, things that people were using at the time, that were really popular sort of appliances. So each woman was told that as a reward for participating in this survey, so they would have to rate how much they would like it, how much they desire it, how much they would use it. They were told that they could have one appliance as a gift in the end. So if they took the survey, whatever one they wanted, they could pick what appliance they wanted. So what they were doing is they were given a choice between two of the products that they had rated equally as attractive. So prior to any of this, in the survey of just questions, they rated, for example, I like this toaster and I like this coffee maker, and I would rate them highly attractive and highly likely that I would purchase them and use them. Okay. So what they would do is, after the decision was made in terms of, okay, I like these two things equally, and, knowing that at after the end of the survey that she was going to get something, right? They asked them to choose. They said, okay, well, do you want the coffee maker or do you want the toaster? And so remember, they rated them equally. They said they were equally attractive. They equally wanted them. They liked them the same, right? After the appliance was wrapped up and given to the woman, 20 minutes later, they came back and they said, can you please re-rate your products? Okay. So what do you think happened? Remember, prior to the survey, they rated let's just say the toaster and the coffee maker equally. Let's say the woman chose the coffee maker. Do you think that she rated the coffee maker and the toaster equally the second time around she had to rate? So after 20 minutes later, they came back. She had the coffee maker in her hand. Instead of rating them equally again, she rated the coffee maker higher. And not only did she rate that higher, but she rated the toaster lower. So she remained liking the coffee maker, but she decided that she liked the coffee maker even more. And this is important, liked the toaster even less. So she did a much lower rating, drastically lower rating on the toaster compared to the original rating, right? So when you make a decision, you like the thing that you picked more after you've made the decision, and you like the thing that you didn't pick a lot less, considerably less, because you're trying to reduce this discomfort of, did I make the right decision? You don't want to have any kind of regrets. And so you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, I got this coffee maker, and you know what? I really love it. I really, really do love it. Okay. Because I can do all these things. It's even got a clock in it. Right. And then you look at the toaster and you're like, I'm really glad I didn't choose that because that doesn't have a clock in it. And this one does. And I can make my coffee every morning. And so you're going to rate the thing that you like higher, because you want to be happy with your decision. And we do this with everything, right? Now, not everything's created equally, right? So the more important the decision, the more dissonance you're going to experience, because there's more chance for regret. And so because of this, we want to make sure that we make the right decisions and that we're happy with those decisions. And so if you're trying to choose, let's say, for example, the choice between marrying these two individuals right here, okay, to the left, or you're trying to decide which two coffee makers do you want? Do you want a Keurig that does 1 cup, or do you want like the Mr. Coffee that does that has a carafe. Like, what do you think? Do you think that marrying somebody or deciding which coffee maker you want, which one's going to create more dissonance? Who to marry, right? Exactly. I would hope who to marry, right? That's just somebody said, I hope. Yeah. So, the more important the decision, the more dissonance you're going to experience. Also, the more permanent that decision is, the more dissonance you're going to experience. Okay. So, how difficult is it for you to revoke a marriage, or annul a marriage, or to divorce somebody versus buying another kind of coffee maker, right? There's a lot more permanence in deciding who you're going to marry than it is for deciding what appliance you want, because you can just go get another appliance, right? So it's not something that is going to cause you a lot of dissonance. So deciding the coffee maker is going to cause you a lot less dissonance because it's less permanent and it's less important than deciding who you're going to marry. So these are definitely factors that you have to keep in mind. We also know that, for example, all sales are final. So when you buy a flat screen TV, for example, do you think that you're going to be happier with your purchase 10 minutes before you buy the TV or 10 minutes after you buy the TV? So if I tell you all sales are final, you cannot bring this back and get your money back, you're going to be happier after, right? 10 minutes after, because you can't bring that thing back. So before, you were like, I'm not sure if I really want this, and la, la, la. And now you're coming back and you're like, okay, I'm really happy with this TV purchase. I can't do anything about it. I might as well enjoy it, right? And so that's what we kind of end up doing, is saying that the less likely that you can actually revoke that decision, the more dissonance you're going to experience. Therefore, the stronger you're going to end up feeling about it. What happens is that salespeople, whether or not they're aware of this actual process of like understanding the psychology behind it, whether they're actually like can name it, or this is just something that they've kind of just caught on to. When you have something that you think you cannot turn back and change your mind, okay, we call that sort of irrevocable. Okay, if the decision that you made is permanent, okay, it is irrevocable. And the more permanent and less likely you can actually change your mind, the more dissonance you're going to experience. Okay. And that means that you're going to be more motivated to reduce the dissonance by justifying your purchase or justifying your choice. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be a purchase, just a decision that you make. Okay. Now, what happens is that salespeople really understand this. They really, really understand this. And what they do is they play on this. So I'll give you guys a couple of examples. So if you are, this is probably one of the most common ways to see this in action, is buying a car. Okay. So if you go to purchase a car and the person who's trying to sell you the car gives you this illusion of irrevocability, they're pushing you to make a decision to purchase this car. One way they can do this is by giving you a sense that you've already started the process and that you can't back out of it. Okay. So they don't often tell you, oh yeah, okay, you wrote a check for this, like whatever it might be. If you've ever like had to put a deposit down to just like see something, or if you've had to, put a deposit down or give your information to test drive it, they're trying to use this as an illusion that you can't back out of it. Your information's already started. You can no longer say, I'm not going to buy this car. They kind of give you this illusion that that you can't back out. And so what that does is that it pairs with your excitement for purchasing a new car. So they know that you're like excited and you don't want to be like thwarted in your attempts to buy a car. That's kind of a block. And so that's going to cause disappointment. And so they know that if they do something that's going to block this excitement, that you will experience dissonance and that you could, go lean the direction of not purchasing the car. So what they do is they try to build up the excitement And they try to basically say, hey, oh, let's just get the ball rolling. Let's get this moving. And that's the reason why they push you so hard, so fast, because the deeper down the hole you go, the more information you give, the more forms you sign, the more money that you provide them. So for example, if they say, well, we have to run a background check, let's just say we have to run a background check and that's going to be $50, and you're really interested in this car and you give them $50. Well, you have already kind of started the motion and you don't want to lose any of that momentum. And so they sort of give you this sense of like, well, we've already started the process now. You can't really back out. And then that will then push you to make the decision to purchase the car. And whether that's directly, they usually don't necessarily say that, but that's something that you usually say in your head. Well, I've already started this process. So let's say one really popular one is that you'll like be on your phone and you'll say, oh, hey, this same exact model and make on this car in this other dealership is cheaper. I want to go over there and get that car. Well, chances are you're not going to go do that for several reasons. One, it would require you to stop everything that you've just done and waste all of the time that you've done, right? You've already started the ball rolling on that. And two, you're already really excited, and that would disappoint you to have to wait that much further to go check that car out. So that is definitely something that car salesmen will use to their advantage, because they know you're excited. And if you say, oh, hey, I'm looking on my phone and this vehicle, the next town over is cheaper. Well, they'll say to you something like, well, but you're already here and you've already filled this out and you're saving money here and making it up, where you're actually paying less money because you've already started the process with us. And now you got to go with them and they're going to make you run, this fee. So they've got that all in place to try to get you to stay where you're at and purchase their car. So another thing, so somebody asked this in the chat, is that why they use the salesman voice, like really chipper, excited tone that we sometimes use for kids? Yeah, they are playing on that excitement. Just like you have a little kid who's interested in like, ooh, I'm going to get a toy. And you're like, oh, you're going to get the toy. Oh man, I'm so excited for you. And that's what they do. They play into that because they know that that's going to motivate you and make you even more enthusiastic and more excited and want to purchase that vehicle. So yeah, absolutely. And that is definitely a trick that salespeople use to try to get you. And I mean, people do it selling houses. They do it any really big purchase, because there's so much dissonance in a really big purchase, and big purchases like houses and cars and, things like that are going to cause you the most dissonance because they're so expensive. We also experience dissonance when choosing how we're going to behave in terms of moral behavior. And so, for example, let me ask you in the chat, is it okay to lie to a friend? So this is an immoral behavior. Lying is an immoral behavior. Is it okay to lie to a friend? And if that's the case, in what situation is it okay to lie to a friend? Case of trying to spare their feelings, that there's definitely a way around the lying to try to avoid that. What if it's impossible though? What if it's absolutely impossible to avoid lying? You have to lie in order to spare their feelings. There's just no way to word it where it is not. And even remember, omitting stuff is a lie, right? So a lie of omission, not telling them something. So for example, let's say they have a boyfriend or girlfriend and you see them out with someone else and you fail to mention that to your friend because it's going to really hurt their feelings. That's a lie of omission, right? So somebody said to make them feel better if you're trying to surprise them, right? So if there's a surprise party and you're not telling them about it. Let's see. Okay. So for example, if they're going to get engaged and you want to lure them to a restaurant because the significant other is there. So how do we justify these lies? So in the case of the surprise party or an engagement, what's your justification for lying to your friend? You're being dishonest to them, but what is your justification for that? The lies benefit them. Okay. All right. That's very interesting. So same sort of thing when making them feel better. it's going to benefit the person's or spare the person's feelings, right? So when we have a moral dilemma, when we come into a situation where we have to decide, we go the honest route and we hurt somebody's feelings, or we mess up a surprise, versus the dishonest route of sparing feelings, and potentially, helping a surprise, right? These are implications for a person's self-esteem. We have to then kind of choose which route we're going to take. And the dishonest route is going to make us feel bad, in some way, even if it's a small little thing or a big thing, like, oh, I feel bad for lying to them that we are not actually going to eat dinner together, but in reality, there's a bigger surprise planned and they're going to be so excited. Your justification is it's going to benefit them. They're going to have fun and they're not going to be mad at me because I'm leading them into this greatest, what a great moment in their life, right? And you also justify that you're going to come clean to them, right? So there's a comment here. Well, I'll tell them eventually and they'll love it so much. So the idea that you're going to be dishonest for a period of time, but you're going to come clean, is a way to justify that choice, right? You say, well, yeah, I'm going to lie to them, but I'm going to tell them the truth, like when it's over. When we take this kind of potential hit to our self-esteem, we have to make these justifications. So, for example, if you are lying to somebody, a friend of yours, because you want to spare their feelings, part of the justification is, well, I'm lying because I don't want them to get hurt even further, right? And so, again, that's a justification. And so, what's interesting is that when we have to kind of go through this process of dissonant reduction. Okay. And when that follows a difficult moral decision, it can cause people to either behave more morally or less morally in the future. So depending on which way you go, if you decide to make the ethical decision, that is going to make you act more ethically in the future. And if you choose an unethical route, then that's going to make you more likely to be unethical in the future. So the decisions that you make are going to influence your later behavior. Okay. Same thing with stealing. So when do you decide that you're stealing something versus maybe borrowing something? So let's say you have a roommate and you guys are like the same size and you really like this person's jacket, and you're like, well, I would really like to borrow that, or I want to take it. When can we justify something as stealing? And when do we justify something borrowing? And when can we justify not getting permission? So what scenario would you kind of come up with where you say, well, I'm just borrowing it, or I'm outright taking this? Okay, so stealing is when you take something without asking. Borrowing is when you ask to use something and the owner of the item approves. Okay. That's true, but I think that stealing usually means that you're not going to give it back. You don't have any intention to give it back, whereas borrowing is, I'm going to take this thing, but I'm going to hand it back to you. And definitely borrowing can happen without permission, right? So does anybody have a roommate that takes things but then gives them back? Some people do get really mad about that. Yes, yes. And so in that situation where you have somebody who potentially will get mad, but you need something, how do you justify either stealing something or borrowing something without permission? So if you take something from someone that's close to you, okay, it was an emergency, right? I really needed this. It was a really important thing. So you're justifying, well, I couldn't get a hold of you. I couldn't ask you. And if I could have, I would have, but I didn't have time because it was an emergency. That's definitely a justification, or you weren't around. Exactly. Or I texted you, but you didn't answer me, right? And so that's justifying, oh, I'm sure they'll be fine. Another justification is, well, they borrow my stuff all the time, so I'm just gonna borrow this real quick, right? So these are all justifications to make us feeling better. Living with sisters, exactly, or any kind of siblings taking their things. And I have 3 boys, and I'm constantly turning around. Somebody's got somebody's of something. Well, you take mine. That's always their answer, right? Oh, I'll give you something better after I'm done. I'll give you $10 or $5 for this, or I'll go buy you a new sweater. Like, leave me alone. Let me just borrow this, right? So the problem is that this gives us a dissonant feeling, right? That's the reason why we have to make the justification. That's the reason why we have to tell ourselves, oh, I'll give you something better later, or you always borrow my stuff, because stealing is bad, right? People who steal are bad people. Well, you just did something bad. You just stole something. You just borrowed something without permission. Therefore, you don't tell yourself, well, I'm a bad person. Instead, you change and say, well, let me justify this. I only did it this once. They do it to me. They're probably fine. I'll pay them back later. I'll whatever, right? That's the reason why we justify. Same thing while we lie. Liars are bad people, but I just lied. How are you going to justify your and keep your self-esteem intact, right? Because that's the important part, is keeping your self-esteem intact. And we find, oh, I got something in chat. Hold on. Sometimes borrowing depends on the object too. Like, can't really borrow food or things that aren't the same after you return them, or can't be purchased at all. So in that case, it would be stealing, because you can't borrow somebody's, pudding, right? You eat it and it's done. So what you could say is, well, I'll buy you more after. Or, I'm going to use this up, and then I'll get you more. I'll get you double. And so again, that's justification. So it does depend a lot of times on the borrowability of the item, right? Or are you stealing this, or are you borrowing it?